party. Let me take this moment to offer my sincere tributes to two stalwarts in the annals of Indian history, Lal Bahadur Shastriji, the second Prime Minister of independent India, known for his acumen and planning skills, who promoted the white and green revolution and helped boosting the food production of our country. And the second one, of course, needs no introduction, of whom Albert Einstein once said, "Generations to come will scarce believe that such one as it is ever in flesh and blood walked upon this earth." I'm of course referring to Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, the Mahatma, the great soul. And today, we are gathered here virtually, of course, to observe his birth anniversary. To help spread Gandhiji's legacy and timeless message of non-violence and peace across the world, the Government of India 2 years ago launched this long series of events on the occasion of his 150th birth anniversary year. And we at RGU is organizing this webinar to commemorate this 2-year-long celebration of the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome our esteemed speaker, Professor G.N. Devi. We are also honored by the presence of our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor S.P. Singh Sir, the Chairperson Academics, Professor Buraguhai, Registrar, Madam Andira Mimani, my colleagues, student friends, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the webinar. Royal Global University is a leading university of Northeast India, committed to provide unparalleled education to render holistic development of the students. It caters to 27 schools offering 130 plus courses. And the university is blessed with state-of-the-art architecture, but the strongest pillars of RGU is its highly qualified and well-experienced intellectual capital, who also serve as the motivation catalyst for over 5,000 students. We at RGU, we strive for academic excellence through research-intensive and industry-oriented education, instilled with a strong sense of becoming global citizens, of course, with imbibing deep-rooted Indian culture and values. I, on the behalf of the entire Royal Global University fraternity, would like to welcome everyone to this webinar, which itself forms a part of a long series of webinars hosted by our university, in fact, more than 350 of them, since the pandemic struck and left the world at standstill. Ladies and gentlemen, Gandhiji's teachings are universal and have very special resonance in all corners of the world. And in a country like India, which is home to people from different linguistic, cultural, and social backgrounds, Gandhiji's legacy could not be more relevant today. To speak more about Gandhiji, we have Professor Devi with us. But before I move on to Professor Devi, I would like to request our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor S.P. Singh Sir, to put forward his initial remarks. Well, Professor Singh is a very well-known personality in the field of academics and administration, who I believe needs no introduction. But for the participants who have joined us for the very first time, I must tell you that Professor Singh has been associated with the Royal Group since its inception in 2009 as the founder director of the institution. He further moved to Amity Education Group in 2013 and joined as the Senior Vice President Academic of the group, and was responsible for functioning of 6 Amity campuses situated in different parts of the country and abroad. He also served as the founder Vice Chancellor of Amity University, Chhattisgarh for almost 2 years before joining the Assam Royal Global University in November 2016 as its founder Vice Chancellor. With the vision and hard work of Professor Singh, the university has been ranked #1 private university of Assam by Education World with a span of just 3 years. With more than 3 decades of rich experience in teaching, research, academic administration in institutions of repute across the nation, the Royal Group is blessed twice to have the association of Professor Singh in its journey so far. While serving his second tenure as the Vice Chancellor of Royal Global University, Professor Singh has completed almost 20 years of leadership of well-known academic institutions of the country. Geologist by profession, an MBA and law graduate with a PhD in strategic management, Professor Singh is an ardent baseball player and has been actively involved in various social and cultural activities since his university days. Sir, I would humbly request you to put forward your initial remarks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Ayushman. I'm really, really humbled by your, introduction. It was not actually required. I mean, I'm simply a teacher, a professor who's trying its level best to do whatever best I can do for the benefit of the students, my institutions, my state, and country. And I think last 1 year we are involved in lot many activities related to Mahatma Gandhi ji, and today we are celebrating the Gandhi Jayanti on 2nd of October that we do every year. It is 151 years of time when Gandhi ji was born. And I think I was associated with National Services Scheme, and in the year of 1969, on 2nd of October, on the centenary year of Mahatma Gandhi's birth anniversary, we have launched the National Services Scheme. And that time I was only 2 years old. But then in my life, I got a chance to work with National Services Scheme. So I have a lot of influence from there. So my very revered speaker today, Professor Devi, and also all other eminent personalities present here, is not actually a forum on which I'm eligible to speak much on Mahatma Gandhi. I think Professor Devi will definitely take lead in doing so. But humbly, last 12 days, I'm involved with many webinars, especially with related to Mahatma Gandhi ji, and also the International Peace Day that was on 21st of September to International Non-Violence Day that is falling today on 2nd of October. So 12 days, I was into 12 webinars. And day before yesterday webinar, I was mesmerized to share, I will not say share, to mesmerize, to be part of the forum which on the digital platform, where the very, very eminent Gandhian, Dr. S.N. Subba Rao, at the age of 91, he has given deliberation. He was sitting for continuous 2 hours in that webinar. And then we were having Professor N. Radhakrishnan, and also Dr. Shankar Kumar Sanyal, and many, many other, Joseph, C.B. Joseph. So it was mesmerizing day for me that day and today again. We are concluding by this webinar in Royal Global University. And I would say that this journey of last 12 days and last 1 year especially, I think in our university and wherever I was getting a chance to participate, I know, because of my upbringing and my NSS association, my readings about Gandhiji, Gandhiji's thought, political, economic, and social thoughts, I have actually prepared for the examination. That time it was for the exam. In my school days, it was teachers who has given us many, many good story, information about Gandhiji's life. I have read the book, My Experiment with Truth. I have learned many things from there. And I think I say just one point today, that in the current time, people at times started talking about the relevance of peace, relevance of non-violence, relevance of sustainability. Nature has enough to provide for everyone's need, not for everyone's greed. People started, unnecessarily criticizing or maybe trying to, in the name of development, trying to demean those philosophies. I personally believe, and my university also believe, that all those things are still very, very relevant. And I think the relevance is there in our mind. We might be wearing a coat and jacket. We might not be wearing dhoti. But how many times, how many years, how much we utilize it and use it, how much we minimum affect the nature, Mother Earth, that is what is the minimalistic approach. I personally believe in whatever you earn, but it should not be spending extravagantly or things which actually is going to affect my Mother Nature, the Earth. And the Corona is the outcome of too much exploitation of Mother Nature. So in this context, I would say I request each and every individual sitting out here that become minimalistic, use it what is required. Don't waste food, don't waste clothes, don't waste shoes, don't waste energy, don't waste anything around you. And I think, in my opinion, today's message from my side is only this, and that will bring peace on this earth, that will bring peace on this Mother Nature. We all will be peaceful. So Ayushman, this is from my initial remark. Only one point I have said, Professor Devi. The rest, I think, is all open to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for your remarks. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to begin with an anecdote. In the year 1959, when Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. came to India, he remarked, and I quote, "To other countries, I might go as a tourist, but to India, I come as a pilgrim. Now, the guiding light whose inspiration got Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to India was, of course, Gandhiji. Now, to speak more on Gandhiji and to understand the values and teachings in the modern day contemporary India, we have with us Professor Ganesh N. Devi, a scholar par excellence, teacher, critic, cultural activist, and someone whom I personally look up to. Sir, welcome to the webinar. Professor Devi is an institution builder, best known for the People's Linguistic Survey of India and the Adivasi Academy created by him. His first full-length book in English, called After Amnesia, published in the year 1992, was hailed immediately upon its publication as a classic in literary theory. Since its publication, he has written and edited close to 90 influential books in areas as diverse as literary theory, cultural studies, education, and most importantly, linguistics. When I was reading about Professor Devi, there's this one YouTube video that referred to him as the man who discovered 750 languages. So, Professor Devi has led many, many agitations of writers and thinkers which focus on pluralism and the right to free expression. Educated at Shivaji University, Kolhapur, and the University of Leeds, he was a professor of English at Maharaja Sayajirao University in Baroda. In 1996, he gave up his academic career in order to initiate works with the denotified and nomadic tribes and the Adivasis. During this work, he created the Bhasha Research and Publication Center at Baroda, the Adivasi Academy at Tejgarh, the DNT Rights Action Group, and several other initiatives. Later, he initiated the largest ever survey of languages in history, carried out with the help of nearly 3,000 volunteers and published in 50 multilingual volumes. Sir, I once again welcome you all amidst us. And before I hand over my virtual microphone to you, ladies and gentlemen, I request kindly keep your microphones and videos off at the same time. And if you have any queries or questions, kindly post it in the chat box. We shall take up a couple of questions after Professor Devi's lecture. Sir, everyone is eager to hear you speak. So over to you, sir.
Professor Singh, such a capable and eminent captain of the Royal Global University, eminent academics, faculty members, students, staff of the university, and of course Ayushman, who said so many kind words about me, which were sweet, but he had still a sweeter thing, and that was his smile. All of you, I feel very honored by your invitation. I accepted it knowing that probably I was not the best choice, but since I have tremendous love and admiration for Mahatma Gandhi, I thought I should come and share my feelings about Gandhi with you. So in that humble mood, I speak with difficulty. The difficulty arises because Mahatma Gandhi is so easy to understand that he is extremely difficult to understand. He has been a paradox. He has been maker of an era, and yet somebody who always denied that he was making an era. He's someone who brought us freedom. Of course, hundreds of others were involved and gave their lives. But metaphorically, Gandhi led us into freedom, made us a democracy, made us a modern nation, and yet he was someone who was quick to say that his turf was a village and not the parliament. I like to mention this for the benefit of the students, that on the day when India gained independence, Gandhi was not in Delhi. There are two such persons. One is Aurobindo Ghosh, who had started in 1905 a great movement and spelled out Swadeshi and Swaraj as the mottos of that movement. He too was alive in 1947, but he was in Pondicherry and not in Delhi. And Gandhi was in Naukhali and not in Delhi. I think Gandhi was truly a Mahatma, more than a political leader, more than a social thinker. He was given to the search for his inner self. And that search was so intense, so honest, so transparent, that it provided light for a country that was struggling to arrive at modernity and be independent and break the shackles of colonialism. Now, all of this is known to everybody, and therefore I need not have repeated it. But I wanted to repeat this to remind myself that I was born just a few months after, about a year and few months after Gandhi was assassinated. He was very much in the air. Practically every street, every institution, I could say every tree and every flower, when I was a child, sung the glories of Gandhi. I was very fortunate. Ambedkar was still alive when he passed away when I was six or seven. Such great persons were part of my early life. And when you have such great persons forming the part of your early life, it is inevitable that you start quarreling with them, grow up, get into adolescence. Professors of psychology will tell us that every child quarrels with his father so that he or she rejects the father and in the end becomes like one's father. That process is inevitable. So when I was in my youth, I was more given to Marx, I was more given to modernity, I was more given to skepticism. I like to mock the spirituality of Gandhi. I used to laugh at his use of cow and cow's milk and the goat's milk and things like and fast. I confess this, that I went through that phase. But there's one thing. When I quarreled with Marx, Marx quarreled with me. When I quarreled with modernity, modernism, it quarreled with me. But when I quarreled with Gandhi, Gandhi did not quarrel with me. He just allowed me that quarrel. He was tolerant, even in my disagreement. This is something unique. I thought he was tolerant because he was paradoxical all through his life. But later, much later, I realized that that understanding of mine about Gandhi during my adolescent years and early youth was not quite up to the mark, that I had not fully understood him. I too was a teacher. I taught at Baroda University for about 15 years. And during those years, I had set up an office for my own study outside the university where I could keep my books. In those years, I had started doing some work with beggars in Baroda because I wanted to work with them and see if they could be provided proper accommodation, occupation. So they used to come to my office, sit there, eat with me, chat with me. One day, approximately, this is when I was 35. Approximately a 65 or 70-year-old woman from Andhra Pradesh came to my office. Occupation was begging. She was starkly illiterate. She knew Telugu and some Hindi, but no Gujarati. There was a photograph of Gandhi in my office, in my study. I asked her jokingly if she knew who this person was. I must say that her answer brought tears to my eyes. She said, "This is the only man who always speaks truth. A beggar from Andhra Pradesh, completely illiterate, cheated by the society, cheated by her own family, cheated by the system, had not lost her faith in Gandhi." I think his appeal to people who have never met him, his ability to convey his message to people who had no chance of any personal encounter, despite not having hundreds of TV channels at his disposal, despite not having a huge propaganda machinery at his disposal, speaks volumes for the kind of things that he was doing in life. This is second experience that I want to share with you. Because Gandhi's greatness has come to me not through great books and great thinkers. Gandhi's greatness has reached my heart through words of simple people, ordinary people. And that's why I'm sharing this with you. After 15 years of work at the university, I thought I would move to a tribal village, Adivasi village, and start work with them. During the process of that work, we decided to create an entirely Adivasi institution by the Adivasis for the Adivasis. This required some funds, and we decided not to take money from governments, either the central government or the state government. Obviously, we're running short of funds. The campus was there, but it was only land and the buildings had not come up. And I felt completely lost. I thought maybe I had chosen a wrong path. I was ruining the life of Adivasis and also ruining my life as an academic. I had a cushy job in the university. And quite honestly, I was on the verge of returning home. There in the wilderness of that village, as I sat, there was no light, no electricity on that land. And we used to sit till very late hours, almost midnight or past midnight. I sat on the rock there in that barren land, in the wilderness and complete darkness. One young Adivasi came to me and said, "Sir," he spoke to me in his language, Bhili language, but I'm putting it in English for. He said, "Sir, I have read a book by Gandhi. It is about his work. And one day at Sabarmati Ashram, he sat worried as to from where funds will come. And as he was worried about it, a car stopped outside his ashram and a man came in and put some money before him." This was, of course, this is a famous story. It solved Gandhi's problems and the Sabarmati Ashram could survive. This Adivasi also told me, the same person, on another occasion, some months later, that Gandhi has written that when you are in public work and using public funds, you must use that money as public money and not the money of your organization. I understood the importance of trusteeship, the idea of trusteeship that Gandhi has put forward, that when you build an institution out of public funds, the institution must be returned to the public and not go under your own logo perennially. I thought this was a great principle. I decided to use that principle in my work. And because of these simple ideas, made even simpler by the simplest people in the society, that the work that others call is my work could actually happen, but it is not mine. One book of Gandhi which inspires me to no end is neither the autobiography, his Experiments with Truth, nor Hind Swaraj. Of course, both of these are great books. What inspires me is Gandhi's comment on Ishopanishad. Gandhi had founded a university. Probably all of you know that he started the university exactly a century ago. 1920, the university in Ahmedabad that he set up started, and he made a great speech at the inception. He said that my heart, this is what Gandhi says when the university started. Gandhi said, I have attempted many things in life, but today, as I begin this experiment, my heart is full of anxiety as never before. I'm starting this as the greatest experiment in my life. Gujarat Vidyapit is still there. Gandhi used to go and lecture there. Gandhi used to go from the Sabarmati ashram to this Vidyapit, which is about a kilometer and a half, 2 kilometers probably, on bicycle. And one day every week he used to lecture on important religious texts, whether it was the Quran, the Bible, the Upanishads. And in these lectures, while speaking about Upanishad, Gandhi said that if all philosophies in the world, all the sacred books in the world disappear, and if you have to keep only one book with you, it is the Ishopanishad that I will keep with me. And if all the verses in that Upanishad were to disappear and I were to be asked to keep only one verse, this is the verse I would keep with me. That verse translates in English that the divine is everywhere. And it is that everywhereness of the divine that makes all of us equals. And we can actually truly possess all of this cosmos by non-possessing it. The giving up of what you have alone allows you to understand what existence is all about. Tena taktena. Give it up, and then you will be able to possess it. I thought this was the essence of Gandhi's life. I mean, how many times he gave up what he had himself created. The degree, the work in South Africa, and the two great institutions he had created in South Africa, he gave up, came back to India. And the position he took at that time had come from Ruskin unto this last, to reach up to the very last in the queue. I mean, that's a quotation from the Bible. Gandhi accepted that. The man who thought that Ishopanishad is the greatest truth had an equal ease in accepting this quotation from the Bible unto this last. He made that Antyodaya, he made that as the mission of his life. I can say Gandhi's search of his own inner voice was guided by an Upanishad. Gandhi's work for improving the world was guided by the Bible. He was at ease with all great teaching. And it's not just the theological teaching. He was at ease with non-theological teaching. Plato was a loved philosopher for Gandhi. Gandhi picked up Plato's style of the conversation, dialogues, when he wanted to write his political ideas for fighting colonialism in that treatise called the Hind Swaraj. This dialogical style of writing came straight from Plato because Gandhi had attempted to translate Plato into Gujarati before he wrote Hind Swaraj. Many years later, after the work with Adivasis was complete, and I could happily give away the institution to the Adivasis in the spirit of trusteeship, I took up work of documenting the languages in our country. There are roughly 700 or more living languages, and a large team was ready to do that work. Many came from Assam, and hats off to the Assam team. It was the best. It was the best in my teams in different states. And I say this not because I'm speaking to you, but I stick to Gandhi's principle of truth and nothing but truth. When the books were ready and they were about to go to the publisher, all of us thought we were about 3,000, sir. Professor Singh were 3,000 of us. And we wanted to dedicate this work to the nation. So I convened a meeting of all the state coordinators. 30 persons were there, 30 states, including union territories. And the way we divided the volumes, there were 30. I asked everybody how this dedication should happen. One or two said we should go to the Prime Minister. One or two said we should hold a press conference and announce this. But more than 20 agreed on the idea that we should go to Delhi, but not to the president or the prime minister, but to the house where Gandhi was assassinated, the Birla House, on 30 January Marg, and place the manuscripts on the earth where Gandhi fell as victim to the bullets of the bullets of people laid by poisonous, contemptuous thought. I was so deeply moved. I cannot describe in words. Because I asked them, why do you want to do this? So they said, sir, we have worked as volunteers without taking any money. We are not going to get any awards. We have followed a path that somebody like Gandhi would have liked us to follow. He's not around. This was in 2013. So we all went to that place. We could imagine the blood drops of Gandhi still there. His steps are actually created through the way that memorial is maintained. And we walked on those steps and placed the People's Linguistic Survey of India there next to Gandhi, and everybody felt very happy. Rashtrapita is not a title given to him by anybody. Rashtrapita is a title given to him by everybody. And that's the great difference between Bharat Ratna and Rashtrapita. And any attempt at taking that away from him has no chance of success. Even if people's memories were nailed down to some kind of frozen memory chip, even if people were terrorized into not calling him Rashtrapita, they will still continue to think of him in their sleep, in their dreams, in their hearts as Rashtrapita. And therefore, Gandhi is a single man insurance for India against fascism. His memory is enough for us as insurance against fascism. Let me now, very briefly mention yet another experience and come to more abstract points about Gandhi. In 2015, Dr. Dabolkar had already been killed, but Comrade Pansare was killed in Maharashtra. And soon after that, Dr. Kalburgi was killed in Dharwad, the city where I now live. And I moved to Dharwad because Dr. Kalburgi was killed in Dharwad and there was nobody to take care of the case. At that time, I thought I should return my Sahitya Akademi award because Sahitya Akademi had failed in expressing condolence to one of its awardees, that who Dr. Kalburgi was. When I returned this award, there were many other writers who had returned the awards. And immediately, many TV channels pounced upon us and said this was a conspiracy. This was seditious. And this conspiracy was planned by some political party in view of the elections in Bihar. I knew that this was not the case because I had not conspired with a political party and I had no plan of intervening in elections in Bihar. And therefore, I decided to dispel that impression by asking writers to go south, Dakshinayan, going south rather than going towards Delhi. Many hundred writers joined in that experiment. And some months later, I asked them if we could all get together because they were from many states. And they suggested to me that they would like to gather at Dandi. Now, Dandi is in Gujarat. I was talking to writers in Maharashtra, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, and Goa. I asked them why. Why do you want to go to Dandi? Why not to Bangalore or Hyderabad? Many of them told me that Dandi, and I must share with students here that at that time, Dandi was as barren as any indescript village in India could be. There was no memorial there. Now a memorial is created, but in 2015 there wasn't any. A dried up seashore, a barren place, only weeds grew there, and writers wanted to go to Dandi. I asked writers why they had suggested Dandi. They said Dandi is one of the greatest symbols of protest in the world. And it is a symbol of non-violent protest and protest within the framework of the Constitution. Their argument was convincing. Much later, 3 years later, in 2018, when the 150th year of Gandhi's memory was to begin, 18 to 19, I had convened a meeting of writers from all over the world under the auspices of PEN International, PEN, poets, essayists, novelists, PEN. Writers from 87 countries joined that. There were hundreds of them. Some of them had Nobel Prizes and others were close to the Nobel Prize. They were very eminent writers. And I asked the PEN International and the writers who were to come to India, their preference of places. I had suggested Goa, Jaipur, and Bhubaneswar. And that came the reply from them. They said they would like to go to Aga Khan Palace, where Kasturba Gandhi died when she was still in jail with Gandhi. Two of his closest associates, Mahadev Desai and Kasturba Gandhi, both died in Aga Khan Palace in Pune. Now, Aga Khan Palace is not a palace, it's a small building. And the PEN International brought all the writers to Aga Khan Palace. I thought that these writers, who coming from Romania, coming from Argentina, coming from Israel may not know enough about Gandhi. We know a lot about Gandhi in this country, but it does not mean that everybody in every country needs ought to know. And so I tried to make the inaugural ceremony very brief. I said we'll have a silent prayer and then we'll return to our other sessions. The writers insisted on sitting down on the ground next to Kasturba's memorial there, which is very modest, very simple. I mean, beginning with a beggar story to the Nobel Prize winning writers in the world, they all think that Gandhi is the hope for the world. Gandhi is an extraordinary, unparalleled person. There is a magic in Gandhi, difficult to name, difficult to point your finger to at, but still it is there. And despite attempts at killing him and killing his memory and wiping it out, as it happened in Washington some months back, where his statue was defaced in the compound of the Indian embassy, still he survives and he grows stronger. Now, very quickly, I'll conclude by saying that Gandhi's main work began around the year 1917. After he returned from South Africa and after he had toured the country, and it was with the agitation against the exploitation in indigo farming that Gandhi becomes a major national figure, truly speaking. He was known among the political class, he was known in newspapers, but not to everybody in India. This is precisely the year when the First World War was coming to an end and 6 persons in Munich had formed a party, the National Socialist Party, the Nazi Party. Hitler's emergence from 1922 on till 1932, when he acquired power and seized it, and Hitler's decline in 1945. Gandhi's emergence as a national leader in the 1920s and 1930s, and eventually after 1945 is taking a back seat in the political arena and getting to only the question of eradication of caste and establishing social harmony, tell us that in terms of chronology, Hitler and Gandhi are exact contemporaries. Today, when the world speaks of Hitler, it speaks of Hitler with a sense of shame, a sense of denial. Even the extreme right parties in Italy and Germany carry the images of Mussolini and Hitler with hesitation. But when Gandhi is spoken about, even by his ideological enemies, is spoken about with utmost respect. Why is this so? This is so because what Gandhi did was not for himself or for his fame or for the power that he would enjoy in this life or in the life after. What Gandhi did was for humanity. What Gandhi did was to remind everybody that more than life, conscience is important. More than getting, giving is important. More than untruth, truth is important. More than conflict, collaboration is important. More than pride, humility is important. And more than having a sense of achievement is important, knowing where you have failed. At the end of Hind Swaraj, in the last chapter of Hind Swaraj, the last but one chapter of Hind Swaraj, he has given a list of things we must do. And one among those reads, I quote from it, Gandhi says, "This is the moment of repentance for us." Christ had said that let everybody repent for the sins. I mean, Christ had idea of sin and virtue. Gandhi was not talking about sin and virtue in theological sense. Gandhi was talking about the order that the society is. Gandhi was talking about the structure that power is. Gandhi was talking about the transaction that human relations are. And within that order, within that structure, within that transaction, he was advocating repentance. If everybody learned to repent and reform, the world would be better. Gandhi's ultimate message to the world was, my work is my message. His ultimate message to the world was, if you want to see the world change, begin that change within yourself. The ultimate weapon of strength and power that Gandhi gave us was that one person is enough to change the entire world if that person has the courage and conviction to be truthful, to be peaceful, to be prayerful. It is his truth, his peace, and his prayer that will keep humanity going forever to a better world. Dhanyavad. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for such a lucid and luminous talk. We have a couple of questions which I would like to address. Sir, before that, I would like to take an opportunity to ask a question from my end. Sir, in a country like India, which is at the moment a very polarized nation full of violence, how pertinent do you think, the idea of non-violence in general, not just one propagated by Gandhiji, but the overall idea of non-violence is pertinent because we are living in a post-truth world where people hardly have any compassion for others. So do you think that the idea of non-violence can survive in a country, as far and wide as a country like ours? Thank you, sir.
Non-violence as a term has a dictionary meaning, and the dictionary meaning is it means what violence is not. Gandhi had a meaning for that term, which was his own coinage, and it was as follows. Gandhi said that greed generates violence. He had drawn this meaning upon Jain thinkers. As you know, he was deeply influenced by Jain philosophy. Even before going to England, he had accepted a guru who was a Jain thinker. And in Jain philosophy, parigraha, that is, pari is hand, holding things with your hand, possessing, is not encouraged. Aparigraha, that is, not holding, not owning, making yourself dispossessed, is accepted in that philosophy. Now, Gandhi felt that the source of violence is greed. Your Vice Chancellor very correctly pointed out when he was making those introductory remarks, please do not use what is more than necessary. Gandhi had said at one place that the world has enough for everybody's need, but not enough for everybody's greed. Greed is the source of violence in Gandhi's thought. Now, returning to your question, non-violence, that is, not being greedy, is that relevant to our times? My answer is, in a world which has a population of 850 crores, of whom nearly 630 are in economic south. I'm not referring to geographical south. In a world which is seeing the worst economic debacle in the last 130 years, in a world which does not have food security, health security, access to knowledge for everybody, a world where the gap between the rich and the poor has widened beyond any scales known in the past, what more can be pertinent than saying that at least some of us must overcome greed so that the others can satisfy their needs? Now, your question had a second component. And so, in Gandhi's sense of violence or non-violence, today in the world which is so divided in terms of those who possess and those who are dispossessed, is, I think it is far more relevant than any time in the past. It is more relevant today than it was relevant in his own times. But your second question is, the world is sharply divided. Yes, the world is sharply divided, not just in India. It is divided in India in terms of religion and many other ways, that governments of all kinds are, and political forces of all kinds are trying to divide the society in order to remain in power. But the world is divided in other countries also. It is in Turkey, in Egypt, in the United States. The United States today is absolutely divided. There is no bridging possible in that society. It is divided in England over the question of Brexit, for instance. It is divided in, and you look at it, probably with an exception, a rare exception of country like New Zealand, the world is sharply divided today. At such a time, Gandhi's idea of non-violence becomes relevant because of the following reason. The world is divided not because of right versus the left or the left versus the right, but because the international institutions which were set up to safeguard the world and its harmony have collapsed. Attempts were made from the beginning of the 19th century to, or even, one can say the Westphalia Treaty. Professors of political science will give you lots of details on this. Again and again, the world has, ever since the idea of nation need to coexist without use of violence or arms started settling in, there have been attempts to create international institutions to safeguard the existence of nations without having to get into violent conflicts. These international institutions have changed from time to time. The last time round, we had the United Nations international institutions in the 1980s. The World Bank and other international institutions have come in, slowly replacing the 1950s set of international institutions. But during the second decade of the 20th century, even those, particularly after 2003, beginning with 2008, busting of the economic bubble, and 2030, affirming, reconfirming that such economic arrangement is not viable, such ecological arrangement is not viable, particularly when we started getting signals of the tipping points in the ecological history of the world. There has been a conspicuous lack of international referees. And as a replication of that international situation, internationally, in every country, there is an increasing lack of referees or referential institutions are being eroded, destroyed, but this could be the beginning of a new age. This need not be for us the time of despair, disappointment, disillusionment. We will have to look at the seeds even among the ashes, seeds of reconstructing the world. And that new world has to be built on the principle of non-violence, not on the principle of violence. And therefore, Gandhi is far, far, far more relevant today than ever before. Thank you.
So one more question, sir. Many people believe that Gandhiji was a foe of the Western civilization, but Ramchandra Guha, in his book in Gandhi That Changed the Years, categorically mentions that there were three white men, if I may call it, Henry Salt, Leo Tolstoy, and John Ruskin, who were his mentors and highly influenced his ideas and his thoughts. So since you're mentioning about Gandhiji's influences by the classics, Indian classics, so were there any Indian individuals or philosophers who were responsible in shaping Gandhiji's thoughts and ideals from a very young age?
Gandhi's life is like an open book, but the flip side of the book is a closed chapter. Gandhi did not regale in speaking about influences on him. Gandhi drew upon the saintly tradition in India, but he did not speak a lot about Indian traditions. Gandhi rarely keeps quoting, ancient texts and medieval texts. There are some people who at the drop of a hat go back to some ancient text and make us feel that they are connected with the ancient world. Gandhi was deeply rooted in the Upanishadic wisdom, but rarely spoke about it. Gandhi spoke through his action. But are there persons that influence Gandhi's thought? Of course, Srimad Ramchandra. The deepest impact on Gandhi's thought was of Jain philosophy, and that came from his childhood. Then there was his friend, Dr. Mehta,
yes,
who received him in London when Gandhi went to London for the first time to study. He was uncouth. He did not know how to cope with the society in London, how to dress there, how to eat there. And Pranjivan Mehta, who was some years senior to him and had been studying in the at a university in North Europe, because he did not want to study in England, came to London to receive Gandhi, put him up in a hotel, told him how to behave. Pranjivan Mehta was a constant peer for Gandhi. They kept exchanging ideas. In fact, the 1919 book of Pranjivan Mehta on the use of mother tongue for education had a preface by Gandhi, and where Gandhi wrote the kind of words that Pranjivan wanted him to write, not the kind of words that Gandhi would have written. These are very strong words about education in any medium other than the mother tongue. Similarly, Gandhi had dialogues and quarrels. Ambedkar impacted Gandhi's thought quite a lot. If you notice the period when Ambedkar and Gandhi come in confrontation for the first time, in the end of Gandhi's life, you will notice that there is an increasing mutual entanglement between the two. It was not a one-way journey, it was a two-way journey. And it's a long story, one should actually worth writing a book about. Similarly, the dialogue between Tagore and Gandhi. Gandhi was impacted by Tagore and Tagore was impacted by Gandhi. Tagore was the senior one, being born at least 7 or 8 years before Gandhi's time, 8 years before Gandhi, and already known in the world much before Gandhi entered the public life in India. Tagore was an impact. So Gandhi was impacted by many Indian thinkers, just as he was impacted by many Western thinkers. Because for Gandhi, the Western India, please consider this. Gandhi never treated the West and India as a dichotomy, as dual. He thought they were one and the
One.
same.
Yes.
Ashish Nandi's book on Gandhi, The Intimate Enemy,
Yeah.
explains this. Gandhi felt at ease. He was very comfortable with friends from England, United States, France, and South Africa. Just as Gandhi was comfortable with Indian farmers, villagers, Indian social workers and thinkers. He was a person who had made the universe as his nation.
Yes.
Gandhi has rarely, shown off saying, I am very proud being Indian. Has he said that any time?
Never.
Never. But he has said, I feel ashamed by
Yes.
being a human, because humans have been cruel to other humans so many times. So he was thinking of himself as a human being, not as an Indian, not as an Occidental or Oriental. Orientalism and Occidentalism did not disturb his thinking about life and the world. That happened in the case of the Hindu Mahasabha, for instance, which thought of themselves purely as Occidental, as purely as Oriental, as against the Occidentals. That was the big difference. There is no space for contempt or hatred in Gandhi's mind, because Gandhi did not look at anything in terms of twos. He looked at everything in terms of ones. He was the only social leader who told us, don't hate the British. Don't hate. He said so many times, I love English people. Even during the roundtable conference, he went to Manchester and said, I love you. But if you are destroying workers in India, you should not do that, because workers in India are as dear to me as workers in Manchester, textile workers in Manchester. Which other leader thought of the entire world as his arena? He's the only one. That's why the world accepted him. The world has not accepted him as an Indian leader. The world has accepted him as a universal man. Just like the world accepted Rabindranath Tagore as universal man, Gandhi and Tagore are the only two Indians accepted all over the world as universal human beings. Very rare case. Very rare case. And Gandhi tops the list among the two.
Thank you. Thank you. Sir, this is one final question. I know since we have a time constraint, one of our young audience members, what is the contribution, or how was Gandhi able to mobilize during his time in South Africa? No, since we know a lot deal about his stay in India, but how monumental was his influence in South Africa?
Gandhi used two fantastic methods. One was based on language, other based on gender. And if you read through the accounts of the struggle in South Africa, you'll notice that Gandhi decided to work closely with people from Tamil Nadu, what is Tamil Nadu now, that is South India, what was called Madras. And he decided to work closely with the people on the western frontier. So the South Indians, Muslims, and Gujaratis, Bohras in particular, Gandhi decided to bring them together. This was the first phase of his work. But in the second phase, he evolved a weapon, a method that had not been used in India's history or the world history almost for 1,000 years or longer. And it was as follows. When he was planning a long walk, almost 100 kilometers or 100 miles, whatever the distance is, 80 miles, to protest against the unfair citizenship laws, protest against the demand of the Smuts, General Smuts government, demand of having a new marriage certificate against the social conventions of those who had migrated to South Africa. Gandhi was first planning a walk where only men were involved.
So this is in South Africa, sir?
For a list of those who would participate. And the list did not go beyond 16, a small number. So he was very disturbed. And he asked Kasturba, he said, would you walk with me? Kasturba accepted. I mean, that's the greatness of Kasturba. Kasturba convinced women of other Indian families to walk with her. And it is when women and men started walking that the numbers swelled. From some only in dozens, they became hundreds and thousands. And this long walk became a world news and a pressure on the government, so much that General Smuts actually had to accept the demands of the protesters. Involving women in any struggle was a method that Gandhi invented because Kasturba collaborated with him. I will add now something more. Kasturba Gandhi passed away when Gandhi was in as I mentioned, the Aga Khan Palace in Pune, in jail. And she died, she died, and Gandhi felt very lonely. He was almost like a lost child after her death. Please remember that Gandhi did not try out any major public satyagraha after her death. It was only fasting, uposhan, as a weapon that he used. I am trying to say that satyagraha, that is a public protest jointly by men and women, was a method that Kasturba had granted Gandhi, which Gandhi used till Kasturba was alive and not beyond. These are the methods. By taking many lingual people together, and for Assam, this is very necessary. You are in Assam, and Assam has close to 45 different languages. For any movement, please involve everybody in it, including the Bodos, including those who speak Bangla, Assamia, Garo, Kasi, and involve women and men together. All the struggles where only men have protested have normally failed. Satyagraha, in order to be Satya, needs the presence of a woman. Gandhi, in fact, transformed himself physically also, and became very close to being neither a man nor a woman. Almost a combine of the two, androgynous, having both the genders in his skull. I think that is the secret of his success. That is what made him very distinct from others. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I must tell my audience that I'm extremely sorry if I have not been able to pick up all the answers because time is a constraint. Would like to end here on this note. Sir, when I was reading up on you, I found this wonderful article published by the Economic Times. It said that when you decided to move to Dharwar, on a lighter note, actually, you were looking on other different places. You looked to Sikkim, and also you're looking at Tezpur here in Assam, but you ruled out for poor connectivity issues. So on a lighter note, so if you...
I was very keen on settling in Assam.
Yes, sir.
Now the Brahmaputra.
So definitely, sir. So if you still have any plans of moving to Assam, we'll be very happy to host you. And I can assure you, Tezpur and in fact all of Assam is more accessible and connected than ever. So on that note, sir, I would like to really thank you from the bottom of my heart, from the entire RGU fraternity, for agreeing to speak to us on this occasion. I would also like to thank our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor S.P. Singh, sir, for his unwavering help and guidance. I would also like to place on record my gratitude to the Chairperson Academic, Professor Alok Kumar Buragohai sir, Registrar, Madam Angira Mimani, colleagues at both academic and administration, and of course, finally, to Professor Devi for giving us this time and agreeing to speak to us. So, ladies and gentlemen, in Gandhi, we have a best teacher to guide us. From what Devi said, Professor Devi said, he offers solutions to every problem. So let us work shoulder to shoulder to make our world prosperous and free from hate, violence, and suffering. That is when we fulfill Gandhiji's dream, summed up in his favorite bhajan, Vaishnava Janato, which says that the true human is one who feels the pain of others, removes misery, and is never, ever arrogant. The world bows to you, beloved Bapu. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Professor Devi. Thank you so much. It was really
Shall we meet
enlightening.
again soon?
Thank you.
Someday I'll come to Assam and come.
Yes, sir, please, most welcome. We have a very good campus out here with a guest house. You are most welcome anytime you come, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.